Welcome to the 2022 Urban Heat Island Mapping Results webinar. My name is Morgan Zabo, and I'm the Climate and Health Communications and Outreach Coordinator with NOAA's Climate Program Office. We are so thrilled that you could all join us today for this special webinar regarding the 2022 Urban Heat Island Mapping campaigns through the National Integrated Heat Health Information System, NIHIS, and CAPA strategies. We had another amazing year of heat mapping across 15 communities in the US, and we are so excited to share this information with you all today. This webinar is also a chance to highlight the amazing work that these communities did this summer, from the lead campaign organizers, community organizations, and of course, the wonderful volunteers that were out in their neighborhoods collecting the data to better understand heat in their community. Next slide, please. I would like to welcome all of our esteemed speakers and panelists and want to thank them again for joining us today. We have a wide range of presenters, including 4 of the 2022 Urban Heat Island campaign cities, who will be talking to us about their experience and mapping results. First up to give opening remarks will be our moderator for this webinar, NOAA's Chief Scientist, Dr. Sarah Kapnick. Following Dr. Kapnick's remarks will be the 2022 campaign overview by Joey Williams of CAPA Strategies, and then presentations from 4 of our campaigns. After the presentations will be a moderated Q&A session where the audience can ask questions to the panelists about their experience participating in the NIHIS CAPA Urban Heat Island mapping campaigns. And just a few housekeeping items before we begin. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel and heat.gov tomorrow. All registrants will receive an email when it is posted. Second, you can ask questions to our panelists for the Q&A portion of the webinar using the question panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We would especially like to invite any cities interested in participating in the 2023 campaign year to ask any questions to our panelists. And if you are with a media outlet, we ask that you identify your media outlet when asking your question. So to officially kick off our webinar is Dr. Sarah Kapnick. Dr. Sarah Kapnick is a Chief Scientist for NOAA. In this role, Dr. Kapnick is responsible for advancing policy and program direction for NOAA's science and technology priorities. Dr. Kapnick has extensive experience at the intersection of climate and science economics. Most recently, she served as Managing Director at JP Morgan in the role of Senior Climate Scientist and Sustainability Strategist for Asset and Wealth Management. While at JP Morgan, she supported sustainability and climate action efforts and served as an advisor on new business and investment opportunities and risks. Previously, Dr. Kapnick was a physical scientist and deputy division leader on seasonal to decadal variability and predictability at NOAA's Geophysical Fluid Dynamics Laboratory. Her work spanned seasonal climate prediction, mountain snowpack, extreme storms, water security, and climate impacts. Dr. Kapnick received a Ph.D. in Atmospheric and Oceanic Sciences with a certificate in Leaders in Sustainability from UCLA and an AB in Mathematics with a certificate in Finance from Princeton University. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Kapnick, and off to you.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I'm so excited to be here today to talk about the important subject of heat. Extreme heat kills more Americans than any other weather event, with an average of 702 deaths and over 67,000 emergency department visits each year. Extreme heat is referred to as the silent killer because we do not see the impacts as clearly as we do with hurricanes or tornadoes. Climate projections indicate that temperatures will continue to rise in many communities across the country, so addressing extreme heat in communities is imperative. For example, from June through August 2022 was ranked as the 3rd warmest summer on record. And just last month in October, the Pacific Northwest experienced a historic heat wave, shattering temperature records for the month, and Washington State had its warmest October on record. Extreme heat is also an overlooked issue, from the mere fact that impacts are invisible. They're not easily seen, and impacts are often delayed, and they're hard to quantify. Some groups are disproportionately affected by heat-related illnesses than others. For example, outdoor workers and athletes are at greater risk than office workers because they have increased exposure to heat. Other groups may be disproportionately affected by the effects of high heat as a result of age or poor health, or lack of resources that enable them to adapt or recover, such as people experiencing homelessness, incarcerated people, low-income communities, and much more. For many years, many federal agencies work separately on components of extreme heat, To better serve the American people on this issue and provide a coordinated federal response, NOAA, along with the Center for Disease Control, launched the National Integrated Heat Health Information System, or NIHIS, in 2015 to develop and provide actionable, science-based information to help protect the nation from heat. Since launching in 2015, NIHIS has been involved in many projects, including national heat preparedness social media campaigns, pilot projects in the Southwest and Northeast, national meetings, the Urban Heat Island campaign, and the launch of heat.gov this past summer, and so much more. While NIHIS has many different working groups and projects, the program we will be focusing on here today is our Urban Heat Island Mapping Campaign program. In this program, we are examining the urban heat island effects, which is that cities are typically much warmer than nearby rural areas, especially during the summer, as cities' roads and buildings gain heat during the day and then radiate the heat into its surrounding air. The result is that some areas of cities can be 15 to 20 degrees warmer than areas with more green spaces. To address this issue and learn more about how elevated temperatures with urban heat islands affect a community's quality of life and can adversely impact both natural and built environments, NOAA and NOAA's NIHIS partner with a private sector company, CAPA Strategies, in 2017 to start mapping the hottest neighborhoods and communities, starting first with Richmond, Virginia. Since 2017, our program has found some stark temperature differences that highlight the need for solutions and actions. For example, in Seattle, in King County, in July of 2020, we found temperature differences of over 20 degrees Fahrenheit between neighborhoods. While many programs are examining the urban heat island effect, our mapping campaign looks to improve methods for measuring, monitoring, and modeling urban heat islands by looking further at the human exposure elements of extreme heat, not just looking at how hot the surface of the land is, but really trying to understand how and why people are being impacted by extreme heat. For the first time in the program, we also implemented additional monitoring products this year in 4 communities. Columbus, Ohio, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania received air quality monitors to pair with heat data. In Las Vegas, Nevada, and Columbia, South Carolina, they received stationary sensors that allow for them to understand their urban heat island over a longer period of time. We will also be mapping 2 international campaigns for the first time this year, in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and Freetown, Sierra Leone. What is most important and unique about our efforts, though, is that it is a citizen science field campaign. It's not your usual research study conducted solely by scientists. This mapping campaign is conducted by the residents of these neighborhoods who are out collecting data, learning about the issue of heat and its health impacts, and they are invested in not only seeing the results, but also taking actions based on those results. This approach is collecting data in intentional ways by including the community and the residents of these neighborhoods. After the citizen science campaign is run, communities will receive a report outlining where the hottest areas in the community are. Campaign communities are then able to take this data and work with decision makers to implement solutions, hopefully addressing areas that have stark temperature differences. It's important to note that there is not one set of solutions for every city. Every community is different, and solutions from the mapping campaign should be focused on addressing needs of the community. For example, the data from our Urban Heat Island Mapping Program was incorporated into Seattle King County's first ever extreme heat mitigation strategy. It was used by the Honolulu, Hawaii Chief Resilience Officer to inform tree planting. The city of Raleigh was able to fund asphalt renovations to decrease the urban heat island effect. Additionally, the campaigns were used by the science museums in Boston and Richmond to develop public education events and many other examples. There's a wide variety of ways this mapping data can be used, and we are excited to learn more about how the communities from the summer will be using their data to implement solutions. I also want to note that data from these mapping campaigns are open source, so anyone can access and use the data once it's available, which increases its use in community settings for research purposes, so we can all learn from this. With these campaigns, the cities and counties are able to learn where the hottest neighborhoods are in order to provide and implement solutions in those neighborhoods. And more often than not, those neighborhoods tend to be disadvantaged communities that are marginalized, underserved, and overburdened by environmental factors. A nationwide study found that neighborhoods subjected to the historical redlining, which were discriminatory home lending practices, typically lack green space and suffer most from urban heat islands. The study found that 94% of formerly red-lined areas, which remain mostly lower-income communities of color, are exposed to higher temperatures than non-red-lined affluent areas. These racist policies also dictated which neighborhoods historically would receive investments in things like greenery and home energy improvements. This historic lack of investment can cause some neighborhoods to be 20 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than others, meaning some are uncomfortably warm while others are deadly hot. Our urban heat island mapping program is part of the Biden administration's Justice 40 initiative, a whole of government approach to ensure that federal agencies work with states and local communities to make good on President Biden's promise to deliver 40% of benefits from federal investments in climate and clean energy to disadvantaged communities. In the community's applications for the campaign, we asked applicants to consider factors such as, do you have a plan for identifying and including environmental justice communities, which are neighborhoods of predominantly persons of color or communities in which a substantial portion of people are below the poverty line and subjected to disproportionate burden of environmental hazards? And will these communities be part of the driving routes selected for the mapping campaign? Do you have plans for engaging underrepresented community members in the mapping process itself, such as working with local environmental justice organizations to recruit a diverse citizen scientist into the campaigns? Do you have plans to apply the mapping campaign outcomes to increase environmental justice and equity in heat resilience planning? I'd like to thank the NOAA Visualization Lab, who helped us create equity analysis maps of the previous and upcoming campaign cities, which you can view on heat.gov. Through asking these questions in the application process, we are trying to address these issues, and the data through the Visualization Lab can be reviewed for how it is achieving those goals. Speaking of this year's communities, the 15 U.S. communities include Boulder, Colorado, Clark County, Nevada, which includes Las Vegas, Columbia, Missouri, Columbia, South Carolina, Columbus, Ohio, Jacksonville, Florida, Knoxville and Nashville, Tennessee, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Montgomery County, Maryland, Omaha, Nebraska, Spokane, Washington, Philadelphia, Brooklyn, New York, and San Francisco. On today's webinar, we will be hearing from 4 of these communities. They are Columbus, Ohio, Montgomery County, Maryland, Omaha, Nebraska, and Spokane, Washington. We are so thrilled to have 4 of the 15 communities with us here today to talk about their experience with the Urban Heat Island Mapping Campaign and to learn more about heat in their communities and how they hope to use the data to implement cooling solutions in their neighborhoods. I want to thank all of the volunteers, community organizations, and campaign organizers for all of their time, effort, and passion in addressing heat and health across the nation. To learn more about this summer's campaign, I am now going to turn it over to Joey Williams, the manager at our partner, CAPA Strategies, LLC. Joey, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much for that great introduction, Dr. Kapnick. It's awesome to hear that overview. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth on the process and our outputs and where we're currently at with our cities, and also share out some exciting visuals and report images as we start to think about releasing those publicly. So this was a great year, our 4th year doing this in partnership with NIHIS, and couldn't have done it without the support of the NIHIS team, as well as support from the National Weather Service. So I just want to shout those groups out up front. I am the program manager for CAPA Strategies, which is Climate Adaptation Planning and Analytics. We are a firm that is working to expand capacity to address climate change with cities around the US and world. And I really want to highlight this year, as every year past could not have been done. We have such an operation here every summer to ship out sensors, to manage the team, to analyze the data. So I really want to shout out here our team at CAPA, Dr. Vivek Chandes, our co-program manager, Akash Upredi, and data analyst, Esteban Merschel, our data visualization and reporting specialist, Zachary Boyce, and our resilience manager, Dana Hellman. So yeah, as Dr. Kapnick mentioned, we added another set of cities to our domestic map here of all our campaign cities from years past. And I also want to mention we had 2 independently funded cities that are also going to be mentioned here. That was Clackamas County, Oregon, near Portland, where I'm at, and also Columbia, Missouri, which is on the map here. So it's been great to work in different regions and to grow the cohort here. We had teams from years past come on and speak at varying points in the process. So to kind of build on the knowledge base that we've been developing over the years here with our campaign cities, and also to be able to see what folks have done with the data to date. So I just want to touch back on the process that our campaign organizers and volunteer teams took on this year. Let me turn on my camera and just see the note. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I think I'm good now. Yeah, so since we've been working on this since about March, when we had cities come on board and form new partnerships and coalitions geared at addressing this project, and also using the opportunity to build more momentum in their local areas on heat. So the first thing we did was establish really robust project teams. We had partners from municipalities, nonprofits, university researchers, graduate research assistants, community-based organizations, climate justice organizations, all come together here in a new partnership in many cases to be able to carry out this project and move forward on heat. So the first thing they started to do was think about where they're interested in this mapping campaign. Many places we map the entire city. Some places we just prioritize based on our capacity, where in the city really needed this type of mapping, this type of data collection on where it's hotter and cooler. Teams also started to engage communities early on to be able to carry out this very robust mapping campaign that really requires a lot of community involvement. As we got closer to the summer, we started to lock down dates or tentative dates where we expected to see the conditions we were looking for mapping, which were clear skies, high temperatures, low rates of precipitation, and low wind. And this couldn't have been done without the support of the National Weather Service and the Climate Prediction Center. So really want to shout those teams out again. That was just fantastic to have their support all through. So then when we got close to campaign day, CAPA sent out sensors, distributed those to volunteers, trained teams up on what exactly they were going to go out and do to collect the temperature data. As you see here on the right, this is an image of, these are actually thousands of traverse points that are so close together from this point of view that they look like lines, but they're actually individual measurements of temperature and humidity and GPS position. And so they went out and collected these data 3 times throughout a hot day. It's quite a big undertaking for anyone involved to wake up, go out at 6 in the morning, then again at 3 in the afternoon, then again at 7 in the evening, and drive an hour-long route, which in effect gives us a really nice picture of the spatial distribution of heat across the city at 3 distinct times throughout the day. So we gathered that data back, and CAPA, we did our analysis process there, cleaning the data, looking for outliers, experimental deviations, and then used a machine learning algorithm to create area-wide maps of heat across the city, again at 3 times throughout the day for both temperature and heat index. And now we've been in the last couple of weeks debriefing and following up with teams to address what are the questions that are coming up, what are some maybe initial interpretations of the results, and where are we going from here? So I just want to really focus on this kind of middle part of the outputs and the effort that went in. So just to kind of put these all side by side, we had 14 NOAA-sponsored cities plus 2 independent cities. I think it's pretty interesting to see all of these side by side. These are report covers that show mostly the evening temperature maps. And you can see how the distribution really varies widely across cities. We've got a lot of different geographies within our cities this summer, some near water, some further away, some landlocked, some coastal, many different climate zones as well. So again, we're adding to this collection that really helps to understand how heat's distributed in different urban morphologies and regions across the U.S. In total, we had another very robust engagement and data collection campaign this year. We had nearly 800 volunteers. This is the number of people who actually went out and participated to collect data during the campaign, which is, it's just mind-boggling every year how many people across the U.S. are going out to do with the same mission, this very similar thing. As Dr. Kapnick mentioned, we had 2 cities conduct stationary mapping, which I'll get into a little bit more later, as well as air quality mapping. And we even had a bicycle campaign in the city that was able to design bike routes because they have such a infrastructure for that in Brooklyn and Southern Manhattan. And we had a maximum temperature collected of almost 103 degrees in one city, and we saw differentials up to 15, 16, 18 degrees in cities. And in total, this means we had over 1 million measurements, individual measurements in temperature and humidity. So just again, really cool to see this all added up here. Looking at the distribution of ages that we had engaged, this was from folks who signed up on our volunteer sign up. So this is a little bit broader picture of who was interested in volunteering in the campaign. Just to share out some fun photos. I think one of the best aspects of the campaign is the fun that people have that in doing this together. So just want to share out some fun photos from the campaign here. Lots of early morning smiles, which I always find amazing that people are so excited to go out and participate in this. Try to put in a photo here, at least from every city. Yeah. We also had some great media coverage again this summer with campaign organizers and volunteers giving interviews to local newspapers and local affiliates. Lots of evening news coverage of this as well on television. And yeah, I think between the media and the engagement, this is always a very robust part of the campaign to get a lot of attention on heat and how local people are trying to do something about it. So now thinking about where our results live, like Dr. Kapnick mentioned, these are up on the open platform, the Open Sciences Framework. The results that we have are the data sets in the raster geotiff form, as well as the traverse data that were collected in shapefile format. We've got all the summary reports here, as well as some metadata. So those will be released soon, and anyone is able to go online, access the report, download the data, and we really love to see where teams take it from here. And just to cover a couple of the additional monitoring projects we had this summer, and that was sponsored by NOAA and CAPA. Like Dr. Kapnick mentioned, we had stationary long-term monitoring using these HOBO sensors that are positioned here in the middle of the screen. This is a temperature and humidity sensor that's gathering data continuously. We had teams go out and install these in various locations across the city that would help us to answer 2 main questions. One is, how do the temperatures that are mapped on this particular day, when we are looking for typical UHI conditions, how does that compare to the UHI conditions that show up across a full heat season in a city? And so we compared these ranges of temperatures on the campaign day to the ranges that we're seeing across a 1 month period. And in general, we saw some very similar patterns, that if one area was hotter on the day we mapped the campaign, it was also typically hotter throughout the summer. And so we'll share out about these results more in depth as well. The second question to address was how to evaluate the predictions of our model against actual temperature measurements here. So kind of an exogenous accuracy assessment. And so we saw some very close trends there in how the data compared with our models. The other additional mapping product we had this year was to map PM 2.5 particulate matter, and we're able to do this by mounting the air beam sensor, as you see in the picture in the lower left-hand corner, mounting that alongside our temperature monitor, and able to, the point here was to try and pick up some chronic pollution that might be linked to what's happening in land use and land cover. And we actually, in Philadelphia and Columbus, where these two campaigns went, we had a fairly clean air day. So it was really interesting to see what did stand out, and we'll be sharing out those results very soon here. And lastly, we had 2 international campaigns that are coming up very soon here, one in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and another in Freetown, Sierra Leone. And we're really excited to be expanding the reach there and learning from what other countries and continents are doing around heat. And so from here, we'll soon be hearing from other campaign cities where they're going with their data. But really, we're starting in this point of identifying exposure. From here, we're going to be looking to apply the data, and then to think more broadly, expanding the capacity of our partnerships to be able to address heat and integrate these data and efforts into other initiatives that are going on at cities. And so CAPA has been working with cities who have conducted these heat mapping assessments over the years, and we see these directions. We see these applications go in many directions, such as decision support tools, additional monitoring to identify indoor exposure or exposure to air pollution. And we also gather teams to think about workshops and plan integration with the data. And so, yeah, I'm sure you'll hear from many other teams here about directions they're thinking of taking the data. So I'll end here and just want to end on a note of gratitude for all of the campaign organizers and the volunteers, as well as all the support from NOAA and NIHIS, National Weather Service, throughout this campaign. I think I'm passing over to Dave Salvarezzi with the Columbus piece.
You're passing it to me. So thank you so much, Joey, for that overview. That was wonderful. And our next speaker will be David Calabrese, who is the Resilience and Behavior Change Manager for Sustainable Columbus, Ohio. So please turn your video on and start your presentation, David.
Great, thank you, Dr. Kapnick. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead
Great.
and share your slides if you have them.
Okay, and actually, yes, I did send the slides. Are you able to see them?
Yes, give me 1 second.
Okay, gotcha. While you're getting the slides up, I just want to say I'm really appreciative of being here. There it is. I can see it now.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Kapnick and NOAA for introducing me. And hi, everyone. It's good to be here. And I'm going to talk about our Columbus area heat mapping project. Next slide. But before I do that, I work in our Sustainable Columbus office at the Columbus Department of Public Utilities. And an interesting fact about Columbus is we were home to the Great Columbus Experiment. This was a revolutionary water treatment system that virtually eliminated typhoid, cholera, and many other waterborne diseases way back in the early 1900s. And that system has been adopted around the world. So we continue to evolve and innovate, and have recently installed a microgrid at one of our water booster stations, and we are using rain gardens, among other solutions, to handle the sanitary sewer overflow issue. Next slide. So let's bring the heat. So Columbus is the fastest growing urban heat island in the country for major US cities, where urban temperatures can be up to 24 degrees hotter than rural areas. We're number 8 in the biggest difference between urban and rural temps. In fact, between 1951 and 2012, our annual average temperature warms by 2.3 degrees, and the average low temperature warmed by 3.6 degrees, which is faster than the global and national averages. And more recently, this past June, we saw the highest number of 90-degree days in more than 20 years. We also had a major power outage that lasted about 30 hours in some neighborhoods. So question we ask ourselves, we know we are hot, but we don't, why do we need to map it, I guess, is the next question. So next slide. We know that every neighborhood is not the same. In general, we know that the heat is not distributed evenly, but we don't know the details beyond that. So we were looking for a project that allowed on-the-ground sensors for heat and humidity, something we haven't done before. This data would inform our actions in the Columbus Climate Action Plan, specifically where we should have our resiliency hubs. And these are locations that can serve as cooling centers, safe food and water distribution centers, and shelters during power outages or heat events. And our goal by 2050 is to have resilience hubs within a 15-minute walk for residents. So the heat mapping data would inform us for that. It will also inform us on where to focus our Green Spot Community Backyards program, which is a program that promotes stormwater education to residents. Residents that participate in that can get a $50 rebate off a native tree or a rain barrel, or $25 rebate on native plants. I think we all know the benefits of trees in terms of water quality, but also in cooling an area, helping keep an area cool, especially during those hot days of summer where we've all been outside and just been sweating. Then you stand under a tree and you're like, wow, this is like a 10-degree, 15-degree difference than out in the sun. But we know with the trees that we're giving out, they're probably around 6 feet tall. They're going to take some time to mature and really provide that much needed shade. So in the meantime, we're also the data will help us focus educational campaigns that are neighborhood specific on how to prepare for and what to do during a heat event. The data will also dovetail off of our tree canopy study. Right now, Columbus has a 22% canopy cover, and we have a goal of 40% cover by 2050. Next slide. So it was really NOAA to the rescue. So they provided a network, information, tools, and support to make the project possible. We teamed up with several other departments and external organizations on this project. And a shout out to CAPA and Joy and his team for being so responsive and putting up with all my emails and being such a vital partner, as well as the Weather Service. You can see our study date and some of the stats on the right. Now, a couple things to keep in mind. The previous 2 to 3 weeks before our study date, temperatures were well into the 90s, but we weren't able to do we weren't able to run the routes at that time. The Monday before the 12th looked really good, but we had to cancel almost at the last minute because of atmospheric changing conditions. So he came a little earlier than usual for us. Also, we are still interpreting some of the data, so our final report isn't complete at this time, but I'll get to when we plan on rolling that out later. And next slide. So here is our project area, the jurisdictions and the points of interest. We did look at mapping the whole county of Franklin County where we're at, but it would have exceeded the maximum 250 square miles, so we had to be strategic on where the project took place. Next slide. And then here are the heat maps looking at the 3 different time runs. Each of these maps have different highs and low temperatures, but use the same color scale. Next slide. So we had 22 routes, including one that traversed one of our Metro Park trails, Alum Creek Trail. The redder the line, the hotter it is. Click, or I'm sorry, next slide. There it is. So we took this information and we put them into a GIS map and included layers for flood hazard, for zip codes, neighborhoods, a litter index, and jurisdictional boundaries. The color blocks you see, those are just to differentiate the neighborhood boundaries. On the actual GIS map, you'll be able to zoom in to see more details and additional neighborhoods that you aren't able to see at the screenshot level that I did here. Next slide. Next came the fun part of recruiting. So we activated our partners, they activated their networks, and we ran social media campaigns. We had two amazing interns, Liv Green and Michael Wolf from the Ohio State University. They put together some really cool memes. We also recruited from our 24,000 Green Spot members, and this is a resident and business pledge program that encourages living and operating more sustainably. Next slide. And to keep that drip of information going, when the maps were finalized, we used that as an opportunity to do some social media posts. So as you can see, we had the dinosaur route there on the left, we had the cat route on the right. We also had some fun with the sensors when they came in. Next slide. So volunteers, as you know, can sign up for 1, 2, or 3 time slots. We had a total of 78 volunteers that rode the routes. This did prove challenging since many only signed up for 1 time slot. So we had to figure out a way to get the afternoon and evening volunteers the equipment. We didn't want to burden the volunteers with having to track down another volunteer. So we set up a drop-off and a pickup location for that. Me being a little bit anxious for the day of, I got to work at 3:30 a.m. that day. I did get a few calls where I had to run out and change out some of the equipment before the morning route. Volunteers did get KN95 masks, metal reusable Green Spot water bottle, and a $20 Giant Eagle gift card that was donated by Giant Eagle. We also got some volunteer testimonies, and we had a thank you outdoor get together. Next slide. So kind of what Joy said, all the volunteers really seemed to enjoy this project. I know I did. And here's just kind of a brief recap of some of the stats. We got media coverage as well. And we haven't, as I said, we haven't released the final report yet. We're still working on some of the maps, make them easier to read, and waiting on just a couple more data points as well. Next slide. But we are aiming for a December release to roll it out. And the next steps after that are to do a neighborhood-specific heat event materials. So looking at those neighborhoods that are disproportionately hotter than the rest of the city from what the data shows, and having things like pictures from that neighborhood. We're also looking to do a possible oral history project for those neighborhoods as well. We want to research the heat-related emergency department visits by zip code. Again, that will help us moving forward with that, and maybe even revisit this in 6 or 7 years to see how that temperature is changing. I have one more slide left. I just want to give a shout out to the project team and a special thanks to Getty Davis with OSU, who is there every step of the way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Next, I would like to introduce Laura Sivels, Climate Engagement Manager for the Department of Environmental Protection in Montgomery County, Maryland, as well as Eiling Jiltinen, the Climate Fellow with the Montgomery County Government. Both of you, thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. While we're getting the slides up, thank you. We are from Montgomery County. I am with the Department of Environmental Protection, and Eileen is one of our climate fellows with the Montgomery County government. And during the time of the campaign, she was also actually interning with Montgomery County's planning department. And so she's been really integral in bringing different pieces together. On this slide, I also have some of our partners that worked with us through this. So we had a smaller planning team made up of different aspects of the government folks. So we had from the Office of Emergency Management, the Department of Environmental Protection, Montgomery Parks, Montgomery Planning, and then we also worked with nonprofit partner One Montgomery Green in order to complete the mapping. So next slide. And that's actually a little bit about us and our bios. So you can see a little bit about our backgrounds and our interest in working in this and building an equitable resilience. Next slide. So a little bit about our mapping. So our mapping took place on August 7th of the summer. We mapped 212 square miles of the county. So a little under half of Montgomery County, but encompassing all of the urban areas of Montgomery County. Montgomery County is just north of DC, and it's in the DC metro area. So it includes big cities like Silver Spring, Rockville, Gaithersburg, Bethesda, places that, and lots of cities and urban areas that sprawl from there. We had an outpouring of support. We had 554 interested volunteers that signed up to participate in the mapping, which we did not have enough mapping to be done for all of these volunteers, and Eileen will talk a little bit about that towards the end of the presentation. Like Joey mentioned when he was sharing the results of the different maps, our maximum temperature was 95 degrees and we had a 12.8 temperature differential. One interesting aspect about Montgomery County is that Montgomery County has an agricultural reserve. So there's a portion of the county that's been designated to not be developed. And I think that contributes. We weren't able to capture all of the agricultural reserve, but made sure to include pieces of it to look at how the temperatures change from these less developed areas of the county to the highly urbanized areas. And then we also had 4 heat hubs, which were similar to what Columbus was saying. We had the same thing with a number of volunteers and trying to find a place where people can, one, just pick up the equipment and connect, but then we use those also as a form of education that Eileen will talk about as well. So next slide. So a little bit about the background of how we came to this heat mapping campaign. So Montgomery County in June of 2021 released the Climate Action Plan. And the Climate Action Plan is Montgomery County's strategic plan to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2027 and 100% by 2035. The Climate Action Plan details the effects of the changing climate in Montgomery County, and it includes strategies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and climate-related risks to the county's residents, businesses, and the built and natural environment. One of the climate actions, A3, highlights the importance of temperature monitoring and alerts. And this heat mapping is one element of that action, which spurred this collaboration with NOAA, NIAS, and CAPA strategies. So it was really important for us to complete this mapping and understand about where heat is distributed throughout the county so that we can build more equitable resilience. And so on that, the next slide, one big piece about our climate action plan and the work that we're working to transform and how we're working as a government and within the county is looking at building this equitable resilience to climate change and making sure that the work that we're doing is focusing on historically under prioritized areas of the county and residents. Montgomery County has a high migrant population. There's a lot, we have 6 official languages that have different neighborhoods throughout the county have higher populations of different migrants. And so it's really important that we're looking at whenever we're doing this mapping in our outreach methods, but then in general, when looking at climate action, that we're building this equitable resilience. Here on the right is a figure from our climate action plan that highlights the high concentrations of impervious surfaces in the areas with the highest social vulnerability. And you can see that there's a really high correlation, which in turn we have seen from our mapping results as well. So we weren't super surprised by the mapping results. We were expecting to see these areas of high impervious surfaces and low tree cover, but it was really helpful. It is really helpful, and it's going to be continue to be helpful as we're looking through the results to have this data and how we apply it. So next, talking a little bit about our volunteer outreach and the roles. I think one aspect of Montgomery County's campaign that was really unique was the outpouring of support from volunteers that were interested in participating. And the way or how this initiated our volunteer outreach was, first we just did a press release. So whenever NOAA and CAPA was announcing all of the heat mapping campaign cities, we released a press release as well about our participation in this, and that really sparked outreach and outpouring of support. Within the first few weeks, we had over 200 people that had signed up and expressed interest in participating in the mapping, which was well over what we thought we were going to need. I was crossing my fingers for 40 to be able to drive the routes that we needed. So that was a really big piece of it. We also once we received this initial outreach, it was also really important to us that we weren't just taking the street scientists that were coming, but we were also doing intentional outreach to have more equitable participation in the heat mapping and making sure that people were doing the heat mapping in their own neighborhoods, and we weren't having people from one area of the county that might be more connected to the government and our programs mapping a whole different area of the county that might be a little more disenfranchised. So we did recruitment on social media, through our blog, through our newsletter, and through Nextdoor to continue to spread the word. And from that, there was a lot of media interest as well. So we were on multiple news stations in the DC area sharing about this heat mapping, and I think that helped raise the awareness as well, which resulted in the almost 600 people that expressed interest to volunteer. Another aspect of our volunteer engagement was the roles that we offered. So it was a struggle for us that this mapping had to be done through driving. One, because looking in an urban area, a lot of people in our area rely on public transportation. Not everyone has a car. And then also looking from the climate aspects, it was something that we wanted to think really intentional about how we were able to do this mapping, collect the data that we needed, but still involve everyone in the campaign. So we provided 3 volunteer roles for people to participate in. So we gave the option of a driver, a navigator, and a neighborhood organizer. So the drivers and navigators, they were trained before campaign day, and their role was to traverse one of the routes in their neighborhood in either the morning, the afternoon, or the evening. And then the neighborhood organizers were a little different and a little unique, and it was sort of a choose your own adventure kind of role, and we provided them a number of resources of how they could engage. So we, first and foremost, neighborhood organizers were seen as neighborhood heat health advocates. So we're sharing information for them so that they can share information on heat resilience, signs of heat health, things like that to their community. We also did a social media campaign, which I have some graphics on the right that neighborhood organizers and a lot of the drivers and navigators shared as well. And then most importantly, we gave them a toolkit and trained them on story collecting so that they can work within their community and their neighborhoods on gathering stories on how heat impacts people's livelihoods, their jobs, their health, so that we can use that while we're also interpreting the results of the campaign. Another aspect of our volunteer engagement was that we offered residents cash reimbursements, and then we gave them the option to opt out to either get volunteer hours or community service, or if they wanted to just waive the reimbursement entirely, which many of the residents did waive the reimbursement entirely, but it was important to us that we were compensating the volunteers for their time. And then lastly, well, before I turn it over to Lynn, the campaign day was a really exciting day on August 7th. Because of our position near the DC area, NOAA is actually headquartered in our campaign. Oh yeah, next slide, sorry. NOAA is actually headquartered in our campaign in Montgomery County. And so we were able to have NOAA participation in the event on campaign day. Also, the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy had interest in participating, and we were able to host a thank you for volunteers. There was local, regional, and international media that attended the event, and that was really phenomenal. So briefly, I'll turn it over to Lynn to talk about the heat hubs and the results.
Okay, so thank you, Laura, for the introduction. Now I'll quickly go through what's happening on the campaign day. So as we mentioned that we have 500 people signed up, and we really wanted to make sure everybody have a chance to map the result. So in the end, we keep 135 volunteers on the campaign day. Next slide, please. So in order to organize all this, a slide before. And in order to organize, make sure everybody can pick up, we have 4 different heat hubs that will distribute across the county, so the volunteer can come and pick up the device, and also like mapping the heat in the nearby area. We also have volunteers stashing at the heat hub to distribute information about heat health resilience, as you can see at the flyer here. And the heat hub is mostly located at the community park or recreational center where they have high foot traffic across the throughout the day, so people can come and check out what's happening here and learn more about this campaign. We also pair with the thermal camera that was provided by the CAPA strategy, so people can use that to take a thermal temperature picture and see how the temperature was different from various surfaces, as you can see from one of the image here that was taken by our volunteer. And we also have community come and share a story with us. So I remember one of the community member come and tell me how he helped his neighbor repair the air condition in extremely summer day. So this story shows like how community was solidarity with helping each other during the summertime, but also tell us that we need to provide assistance for low-income neighborhood to have a functional cooling device in the summer. Next one, please. So here's the result for the Montgomery County's heat mapping. As Laura mentioned, it's not really surprised to find out that the heat was concentrated in a highly developed area. So continue, we're also trying to work with the academia partner to help to share the resource with those researchers and help the Montgomery County understanding how urban heat island was disproportionately impact the different community in the county, and also how that related to the tree coverage and also the impervious surface. Continue, we also try to report out the result for the general public. So we are also working on developing the story map and share the information with the local resident with some creative way to further educate them about heat health resilience. Last but not the least, we also share the result internally with our county agency. So we share result with the Montgomery Planning to assist their master plan process. We also share with the emergency management for the hazard mitigation plan, and also our newly hired nature-based solution planner to incorporate this result into our county's nature-based solution. So this is the nutshell of the Montgomery heat mapping campaign, and we'll be happy to answer any question in the Q&A session.
Okay, thank you very much, Laura Yiling. Next, I would like to introduce Abdulaziz, or Aziz, as he's known for short, Abdullah Adili, a PhD student at University of Nebraska Medical Center in Omaha, Nebraska. Aziz, please turn on your video and start sharing your slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kapnick. Thank you for this opportunity. I would really want to thank first the team, the CAPA, the NOAA team. It was great being part of this experience. And the whole Dr. Jesse Bell team in Omaha. We are really a great team to be able to pull this off. So I will be talking about the heat campaign in Omaha. Once again, it's when you talk about Nebraska, most of the time people think that it's always cold in Nebraska. And when Joey was sharing the result, as you can see, Omaha was actually one of the hottest city that day during this year heat campaign. So it's really hot in Nebraska. So I will be explaining, kind of talking as well about how Nebraska is one of the most segregated city. I will be kind of talking about the redlining as well that happened in the 30s in Nebraska. Next slide, please. So Dr. Kapnick has kind of already mentioned how heat is the first killer, weather pattern, weather event killers, and you know, we have seen in 2022 how almost 80 million people were at some point in August at risk of heat exhaustions. And so this is something that is happening. Climate change is happening. We are seeing this pattern as well in Nebraska. And we are having more longer hot days, you know, nights are getting hotter. So the problem is there. And what we did first was to go within the community and start talking with the community about, you know, these issues are happening and listen. So the first thing we did before even applying for the heat campaign was to start talking with this community in Omaha that we are already at risk. And because we have done a lot of studies saying that the same community are having other health related issues compared to other parts of the city. So we wanted to focus on one part of the city that is already experiencing a lot of health issues. So we looked at them, talking with them, and what we have seen is that part of the city even have one cooling center. So that was already one issue that we've seen there that can even increase again whenever there is any extreme heat event. So we wanted to look at whether the city has a heat action plan. The city of Omaha is one of the cities in the US that doesn't have a heat action plan. We don't have a climate action plan, so that was one of the things that we discussed as well with the community. So the community has really shown concern. And when I say community, it's talking with individuals, talking with organizations that are working in these communities that are already experiencing other health issues compared to other parts of the city. Next slide, please. So I wanted to just mention redlining. When I started doing this study, I was kind of surprised that not a lot of people know about redlining, which is really has impacted the life of many people in the 30s, which are still having an impact today. So redlining is a kind of national policy that was implemented in the 30s to kind of boost the economy. Coming out of the recession, the government wanted to boost the economy. They created the Home Loan Corporation, which affected almost 300 cities, affecting 40,000 people were affected by this redlining process. And they created a mapping, which I will show in each the city that were impacted. They created color-coded maps to help the government invest in those areas. But then that policy was actually used to formalize racial and ethnic discrimination, which has kind of, you will see when I show the map now, that people of color were actually segregated again during that process. So people would rather invest in other parts of the city that were predominantly white. So even though the redlining policy was banned in the 60s, we still see studies have shown that the people living in redline areas are still suffering, are still experiencing all weather-related hazard and other health conditions. Next slide, please. So that was really our focus. This is the map, the redline map that was created in the 30s. As you will see, this is our study area. As you will see, these 4 colors that I was mentioning, the areas that are yellow and red were considered at risk. And when you go to blue and green, you will see A, B, C there. These ones are considered the good areas. And when you look at today the distribution of the population in Omaha, you will see that most white live in the A and B, the green and blue areas, and other peoples of color lives most of the time in the yellow and the red areas. And when you really look at the other social determinant of health, you see that these are the people that are still having health condition. These are the people that have almost 10 years of life expectancy difference. So you can see someone living 3 miles away from you have a 10 years more life expectancy than someone living in the red line areas. So that there is a fact that these issues are already there. So for us, it was interesting to as well see if they are already experiencing these issues, how can urban heat island kind of affect them as well. Next slide, please. So we wanted to see how can we engage the community, because one thing we were trying to do with this project is, engage a community, come up with a community scientist approach where you sit down, you talk with the people, because we just didn't want to go in this community pretending that we are the saviors. We wanted to listen to them to know what are their issues, what is the priority. And that's really what we have done. Whenever we approach people in those communities, we sat down and told them, these are the issues that we are seeing in other cities. What are your issues? What are the priorities? And we wanted to focus on that. So having CAPA and the NICE coming with this study, it was interesting to kind of tell them, heat as well might be one of the issues. How have you guys been coping? How do you think you guys can help? How can we help you better cope with the heat? So that's how we actually did. We engaged the community at the beginning, and we went from, community, the health department, the city planning, the mayor's office. We talked with a lot of NGOs, especially Omaha is a kind of refugee and immigrant settlement center. So we have a lot of Afghan and Sudanese and Burmese community in Omaha. So it was really interesting to be able to sit down and even understand how they perceive all these issues. Next slide, please. So before I really talk in details about what is our study area, I wanted to really show all my gratitude to the Omaha Native community. And one of the things we were really conscious about is to make sure that we always talk with the Native community, get them involved in this study. And I've really learned a lot about the history of the US, about everything that happened and how these things are important. When you go in a community, you make sure you really talk with the people, the Native community as well. So we end up measuring around 80 square miles, over 100 and square. So it was really more than what, 70% of the total, all the city. And once again, we wanted to focus on only the red line areas, comparing it with the areas that are not red line. So next slide, please. So as I was saying, we started doing the community outreach before applying for the NOAA grant, which was really interesting because when we received the grant, that has really given us a leverage, was to go with them and say, okay, this is an opportunity for us to start something. Once again, this was a way to start the discussion. We know there are issues. We don't want to come in the community and say, okay, you know, this is on top of everything you guys are going through, you guys are as well exposed to heat. We wanted to come with the perspective of saying, this is a way to start the discussion on how we can solve these issues. Next slide, please. So as I was saying, we went through the community. We did a lot of engagement with the refugee community, the immigrant community. Every community event that was happening, we made sure we went there and talked with kids. What was particular with our study is we really focus on kids, especially in the refugee community. The kids are the one that can be able to relay the information. And it was great to see that the kids were involved in the study. Next slide, please. So we had our traverse as everyone, each city, once again, focusing on the old city of Omaha. We had 8 routes, and the 8, we have been really able to measure all the eight routes. Next slide, please. So the campaign day was great. As Joy has already mentioned, we really had a good turnout. We had a lot of kids there. We had the community, we had the media. As everyone else, I feel like that was a great part of the study in the whole US. All the cities have really seen how people are engaged in this. Next slide, please. So these are our outputs. As I was mentioning, Omaha turns out to be even one of the hottest city that was measured this year. We had around 103 maximum temperatures. What was interesting to me was the difference of almost, I will say 109.5 Fahrenheit. It's a lot, especially looking at these are communities that already having other health issues. Next slide, please. So the initial observation was to really look at how these are things that we observe. You just drive around the city, you can see, if you see the pictures, you can really see. So the green areas you are seeing here on the picture, these are the area on the red line areas that are green. So it's easy to see how, just looking at this map, you can overlay it with the red line mapping, with the red lining mapping to see the difference. And the areas with having a lot of parking, which are the north and south of Omaha, which has the areas that are yellow and red, still showing higher temperatures as well. Next slide, please. So these are our traverse. I think Joe has already shown that. Once again, you will see here when you compare with the red line map, the areas that were red line, yellow and red are the hottest areas as well. So this is just consistent of what other studies have seen in other red line areas. Next slide, please. So this is the actually when the temperature went over 100, and you can see this is even around 8 p.m. So even when we think about, oh, the sun is down, the temperature should be low, but that didn't happen. Actually, even around 8 p.m., we still had high temperature over 100. Next slide. So the next step for us, this is my last slide. I didn't want to comment a lot about what we are trying to do with the result. As other cities, we want to go back to the community, and that's what we have been doing. Talking with the mayor's office, talking with the community about, okay, now this is another issue. A lot of organizations have reached out to wanting to plant trees, but we're just like, yeah, you can plant the trees, it will take years to grow. That's a good idea, but right now we want to talk with the community about what can we do right now, and that's what we have been doing. We have been doing a lot of awareness campaign, talking with people, going to conferences. And the good thing, the good news about the heat campaign is the mayor's office is willing to have a heat awareness week next year. So by next year, every year we'll have a week, we'll have a lot of awareness activities, and that will be good as well, because now the mayor's office has already sent an RFP for a heat action plan for the city. So it's really good. I feel like our heat campaign, it was right on the time when everything is starting to happen in the city. So that's all for me. Thank you again, everyone. Hope I didn't take more time than I should. So thank you.
It's okay. Thank you, Aziz, for that overview and for the really positive messaging on the end of how this is really being used. So thank you, Aziz. Next, I would like to introduce Carly Honeybang, Climate Literacy Program Coordinator of Gonzaga University Center for Climate Society and the Environment, Spokane, Washington, and Corinna Farho, AmeriCorps Civic Sparks Fellow, also at Gonzaga University Center for Climate Society and the Environment, also from Spokane, Washington. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Kapnick. We're so excited to be here today talking to you all about our Urban Heat Island Mapping Campaign. So my name is Carly Hohenbein. I'm the Climate Literacy Program Coordinator at the Center for Climate Society and the Environment at Gonzaga University. And I just wanted to set the context for this campaign that we conducted over the summer. So the Climate Center was founded in April of 2021 with a mission to serve Gonzaga and the broader Inland Northwest by promoting innovative, interdisciplinary scholarship, teaching, consulting, and capacity building on climate, society, and the environment. And so this was really the first project that we had the opportunity to engage in working in climate resilience in the Spokane area. And so some situational context, in 2021, 19 residents in Spokane County died due to the unprecedented heat dome in the Inland Northwest. And for the first time in the city's history, the city of Spokane had to open cooling shelters to help unhoused residents and residents without AC. And anecdotally, the people who live in the city of Spokane have known that temperatures are not uniformly spread across the city, but this was an opportunity to really dig into which neighborhoods are experiencing heat in a disproportionate way. Next slide. Morgan, I'm not sure if you mean to, but you're presenting a Ph.D. of our PowerPoint.
Are you able to see it now? That's how it came to me.
I only see the first slide.
Let's try.
There we go. That looks better. Will you go to the, yep, there we go. So mapping the urban heat islands presented a unique opportunity to partner with some really interesting and excited partners in Spokane that included environmental nonprofits, higher education, municipal government, and local media in order to cover a variety of stakeholder interests. So 350 Spokane is a local chapter of the National Climate Action Group 350.org. KXLY is the local ABC News affiliate, and we worked closely with their chief meteorologist, Chris Crocker, to recruit volunteers and share information about our heat mapping campaign. The Lands Council is an existing nonprofit in the Inland Northwest that works to revitalize and protect forests, air, water, and wildlife. They have an existing program called Spokane that works in partnership with Spokane Parks and Recreation Department to site and plant urban trees in neighborhoods that have low or historically low tree cover. And so they were interested in partnering with us on this project to use the data to better inform what they knew anecdotally about which neighborhoods were experiencing extreme heat so that they could better plan where they're going to be planting trees. In 2019, the City of Spokane passed a sustainability action plan, which includes addressing climate resilience in the city. So this project provided the opportunity to gather concrete data on urban heat islands in Spokane and better understand how heat intersects with other environmental and social justice issues around the county. Next slide. So about our heat campaign, over the summer, we were able to conduct our campaign. We had 90 community members who initially signed up to participate in our campaign, which was really exciting, doing community science. Most of our volunteers volunteered as individuals, so in the end, they ended up being partnered with people they'd never met before and got the opportunity to meet like interested folks who care about this issue and are interested in seeing climate resilience in our community. Our campaign was on July 16th, and the high temperature for that day was measured at 94 degrees. On the day of our campaign, we were able to actively work with 40 volunteers who drove 7 routes around our city, which is about 70 square miles. And the biggest temperature differential that we found was almost 14 degrees, which is amazing. That means that in our city, on a day where it's 90 degrees, in one neighborhood, it could be as warm as 104 degrees in another neighborhood. So for recruiting our volunteers, we relied heavily on our partner organizations that have deep roots in our community. So 350 Spokane and the Lands Council have existing volunteer bases who work regularly with them. And so we asked those folks to show up for the day. We also relied heavily on our partnership with our local media to recruit and ask people to join us for our mapping. We also had the benefit of NOAA releasing their press release. In addition to Gonzaga being the university in Spokane, we have a lot of people who are interested in working with the university regularly. We did an online training for our volunteers the week before our campaign in order to accommodate schedules, because most of the volunteers for our campaign were of working age. And so in order to accommodate work days and childcare, we ended up holding an online training in the evening, and we recorded it so that volunteers were able to attend if they were able and ask questions live, but we also sent the recording to folks so they could watch it when they had the time to. In terms of distributing, we did a distribution center on campus and had an optional check-in the day before, and then had folks come to a central location to either pick up or drop off their materials. In total, we had 24 media stories about this campaign, including the announcement of the campaign, recruitment coverage, coverage on the day, and then ongoing coverage of our community-wide heat survey that Karina is going to talk about. Next slide.
Hello. So I'm going to go through our heat maps that we, our results really. So here's our morning temperature map. This is from 6 to 7 in the morning. As you can see that there are different hot zones, and there's also some different cool zones. So one of the most prominent cool or warm zones or hot zones really is about 71.5 degrees. And then some of the cooler zones are 58.1 degrees. So this is one of our largest temperature differentials of the 13.9 degrees. This is actually due to Spokane's climate. So this is actually one of the higher ends of our temperature differential in relation to the Spokane climate. It's relatively dry in the summer and has low humidity. But you notice that East Central is predominantly hot. In some of our previous presenters talked about like redlining practices, and then also discussing urban heat islands and what that is composed of. And so East Central is a predominantly industrial neighborhood. Again, we're noticing, again, looking at redlining practices and really throughout the entire city of Spokane. And then those hotter areas are typically composed of more concentrated buildings, maybe hot surfaces or dark surfaces. Really, they maintain a lot of heat during the day. So this could look like pavement, asphalt, and even dark rooftops. Next slide. And so we see in our afternoon temperature map, this is from 3 to 4 p.m. Again, we see those cooler zones, and you'll see for the next couple of slides that the cooler zones are concentrated in that south end, and the rest of the city of Spokane often is very hot. So our high temperature here is 93.8 and our low is 85.2. Again, this is all generally very hot, but our hotter areas are concentrated where there's, again, those urban heat island effects. And one thing I'd like to point out that was mentioned earlier, I believe Sarah mentioned that there's a Justice 40 initiative. They have a opportunity, or really a tool, a climate and economic justice screening tool that is able to demonstrate just the what are considered disadvantaged communities. So this overlays socioeconomic indicators such as low income and enrollment in higher education, simultaneously with environmental indicators such as exposure to pollution, lead paint, even proximity to legacy pollution sites. And most of the city of Spokane is considered many disadvantaged communities, and it's typically overlain with all those hot areas except the south area with the Manitou, Rockwood, Comstock neighborhoods. Next slide. Yeah, so here's our final map. This is from 7 to 8 p.m. Again, it cools off, but in the cooler or the lower areas in the south there. And it's really, recognizing that in these evening and morning temperature differentials, it doesn't really cool off that much, especially in the morning temps, which is, and in the evening, which can be a risk for extreme heat deaths. Next slide. So a little bit about what we do at the Center for Climate, Society, and the Environment. We have two different programs. So we have a climate resilience program, and we also have a climate literacy program. I'm going to be talking a little bit about our climate resilience initiative, which is Beat the Heat. So our goal is to help our community understand and respond to the impacts of extreme summer heat. Some of our key partners are CHI, which is the Community and Health Adaptation Initiative, which works with counties and cities across the state of Washington to come together and discuss what we can be doing to prepare and create resiliency in our communities. And the Washington State Department of Health really heads this CHI partnership and has been really helpful in how we navigate this Beat the Heat. Next slide. So here's a little bit of our timeline. So Carly discussed what we did and how we recruited volunteers, and then the day of. Right now we're working on a heat survey, which allows community members of the city of Spokane to demonstrate and express really their experiences and perceptions around extreme heat, so we can figure out what we need to be doing next to address extreme heat. Next slide. So our findings so far, we currently have, so our survey closes at the end of November. We have 1,673 surveys. Our statistically significant sample size was 1,200. So we're working towards that. We have it translated in English, Russian, Dari, and Spanish as well. And we're currently working on active outreach to underrepresented demographics throughout the city of Spokane. And this can look like tabling. So for example, we might be tabling at community centers or grocery stores. We've done canvassing in neighborhoods and really heard some really impactful stories. So for example, one resident mentioned that some people in their neighborhood, their homes are so old that they can't even open up their windows and often have to resort to punching through the windows in order to get any airflow into their homes. And even this could look like the other program coordinator for our climate resilience initiative. In some cases will go, for example, like to this food drive-through that was taking place, and it was raining out. We were handing out flyers. So really, it's really on the ground work. Next slide. Yeah, so what we hope to accomplish is to eventually, and we're working towards these steps starting in December, working towards developing a community heat awareness campaign. So this campaign is building educational materials with our Gonzaga University senior capstone students are actually working on this, building these educational materials and doing research about how our community should be preparing for extreme heat related events. And the program coordinator and I are working on developing community partnerships to be able to share this information and work with them. And in terms of, and we're working on a more equitable framework on how we do this in a manner that's very inclusive and is considerate of many different experiences and backgrounds. And the Washington State Department of Health is currently helping us develop a GIS map that includes income data, canopy cover data, even historic redlining data, and that map will be available for people and community members to interact with, and it'll be really kind of a representation of what's going on here, as this extreme heat issue is deeper than it is on the surface. Eventually,
Corinna?
Yeah.
Thank you, Corinna. That is, the use of that and bringing all the data sets in together is really amazing that you guys are starting to bring everything together. So I'd like to thank Corinna and Carly and welcome everyone else back to the group. So please turn your cameras back on. We've been getting questions and I've been monitoring them as they've all been coming in. So now it's time to move on to doing a little bit of Q&A before we have to wrap up. So first, one of the questions that we received came in for Dave at the very beginning on the oversight, and the rest of you can also comment. For the citizen science portion of the study, was there training on how to use these tools? One of the commenter had previously used Purple Air and said they had technical issues with the product.
Yeah, so we did have a training, an evening training that was recorded, so others who couldn't make it could still watch it. Joey had presented on how to use the sensors. The one with the air beams, it was a little confusing just because I think it was green, yellow, and orange were the indicators, and the orange meant it's good to go. So a lot of people thought the green was good to go. So we had a little bit of confusion with that. And then the day of, we did have some sensors that we had to change out kind of at the last minute. They were either weren't holding a charge or there was just some other issue with them, but we had the vast majority of sensors did work the way they're supposed to, and we were able to get statistical significance with the data that was collected.
Any other lessons learned from other panelists?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that one thing we have learned, because we did the training online, and one of the high school kids reached out to me that they said they were intimidated to come in these kind of meetings. So it was really a lesson learned for us to know how to reach them. So we had to conduct another meeting on the ground, went to the school and talked to them. So that was really eye-opening for me to just share that they just didn't feel safe or comfortable coming in this kind of meeting with a bunch of grown-ups.
Anyone else find that? Any equipment issues or recruiting issues that you want to highlight and ways that you dealt with them?
I can just add briefly about equipment issues. There were a few minor things, especially with Montgomery County, since we were turning the equipment over. It's like every time of the day was a new volunteer. And so, getting used to, like, if the battery's low, we're trying to charge them in between and things like that. But I think based on the mapping, and CAPA had somebody on call that we could call, and I called him plenty of times throughout the day to be like, was this an issue? Like, how should we handle this situation? And it didn't affect the results of the mapping because we were still able to collect enough data. So the equipment issues we fixed were minor.
I'll just add, we have had a few issues with sensors across the board, the sensors that we've used year after year, and this coming year we'll be completely revamping and ramping up our testing again, so we don't expect those issues to persist.
Last chance. Anyone else? Okay, I'll move on to another question. This was for Aziz, but also for the group in general, on your opinion. How can citizens in cities that might be hesitant to do this type of work, how do you think that they can get their city councils and others to formally participate in this NOAA program? How did you get the engagement and get the support to be able to do this program?
I think the first thing we did was to rely on organizations already working with the communities. We really tried to reach out, first of all, to the health department that gave us the list of organizations doing great work that the people trusted already. So we went through those organizations, and they are the one that kind of showed us the community leaders. So it was kind of really a stage where we went from the health department to the community organizations to the community leaders. And it was just amazing. As soon as the community leader trusted what we're doing, then every community member now were willing to talk to us. And it was just interesting to, once again, I know I keep repeating it, that we have to stop having this saviors mentality when we go talking to these communities. I did more listening than talking. So I think that was one of the ways they trusted us, and they are willing to work with us.
Anyone else have lessons that they've learned of how to get engagement?
For us, it was easy because it was actually the community that came to the city. So a lot of the non-government organizations you saw on my slides, they actually approached us and really wanted us to do it. So, and it was an easy sell because we don't have that type of data. So by having that, it informs our climate action plan, which is the main driver of a lot of our work here.
Yeah, so in some ways, what I think you're saying, to wrap this, is that environmental justice organizations might have gotten involved and really pushed for it, or the communities themselves really wanted to participate. So from everyone's work here, how do you get the communities engaged in the entire process? Because there's a lot of excitement and engagement on getting that data, or desire to get that data, and then getting the data. But then how do you ensure that that data is then incorporated to work afterwards, and it's reviewed in the data and the maps, and then it gets used? There was one example in Spokane where they're now adding in all these other informations to overlay to be able to do analysis. Can you explain, perhaps Carly or Corinna first, how you start going about doing that to make sure that this data is used to the greatest extent possible?
Yeah, I'd say starting building partnerships, and like Abdulaziz mentioned about engaging with people early and often, really, with community members and different people who might might be able to provide. I mean, individually, it can be hard to have all the resources yourself. So you really do need to create and foster those partnerships. For example, the figuring out what is needed to make sure that it's information can be effective in outreach, and the Department of Health and other partners are really instrumental to guiding that, especially community members.
And a simple last question along those lines. Is anyone taking this data to explore cumulative impacts or multiple impacts that may happen at the same time, as in temperature plus the air quality plus stormwater overflow, to be able to look at multiple events as they may combine and amplify an impact?
Yes, the example I will give, right now I'm even at the annual Midwest Rural Health and Safety Conference. And this is a conference where they asked me to come and be able to just talk with people about the heat study we did in an urban setting. And again, this came from the community where they were like, even if we do this in the city, we have families farming. We have families that are as well exposed. So for me, it's just to say that one thing we have been trying to do now is to, okay, already we have been starting talking with people, and we kind of see how they are interested of, implementing already the results to kind of start making changes even outside the city. So that's just something that I found interesting to mention.
Yeah. Thank you, Aziz, for your comments on that. And thank you all for the panelists for all of your participation in today's webinar and for all of your work on addressing extreme heat in your communities. The work that you are doing is really, it's groundbreaking. You're at the forefront of communities in the United States, and other communities are going to be able to learn from the work that you've done. So thank you very much for sharing your experiences with all of us. Now I would like to turn it back over to Morgan to close us out for our webinar today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kapnick, and thank you again to all our amazing presenters and speakers on today's webinar. Apologies to not getting to all the questions. We had such great discussions and presentations and really could keep talking for a few more hours if we had the time. I'd also, again, like to thank all of the communities that participated in this year's cohort of Urban Heat Island campaigns, and of course, all of the wonderful volunteers, organizations, and lead campaign organizers without whom this would not be possible. I also want to remind everyone that the 2023 Urban Heat Island map application is opened and will close on December 16th. So if you are interested in learning more about heat in your community, you can learn more about the process and access the application on heat.gov. And with that, thank you all so much for attending today's webinar. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.